On Xanadas's. This is the Dark Shadow Maverick. Wonderful, beautiful Dark Shadow Maverick Nation. I am the Dark Shadow Maverick. And this is yet another What If. One that I hope you guys will like. I don't know if you will, I don't know if you won't, but trust me, it is gonna get dark up here in this his house. This What If is gonna be dark. Like, if you guys didn't think my What Ifs were dark before, this one's gonna be dark. Like, I've done some dark shit before, but this one's gonna be serious business all up in this his house. This is going to be What If. I really don't know what to call it right away because I had the title in my head, but now I'm all scrambled again for words. Well, I think I know what I'll call it. What if there's one of two things that I can call this. I can either call it What If Touya raised Izuku, or What If Izuku was raised by Touya. Yes, that's right. The Touya whose code name in the League of Villains was Dabi. You know, the brother of Shoto Todoroki and other Todorokis, endeavors one of his sons, the son that was believed to be dead. You know, Touya was believed to be dead, but all this time, going underneath the alias of Dabi, was Touya alive. And in order to make this work, I am going to be doing some aging up and some possible aging down of some characters. Because indeed, like, for everybody to still be able to be in the same classes, like, you know, 1A, everybody to be in the same year, and even the same class in general, like the same school in general. Well, I would have to be doing some meddling with the aging. I'm going to say that Endeavor and Ray, they raised, well, they raised Touya, and with the time in between them raising Touya and whenever Shoto was actually born, I'm gonna say that it's actually an extensive period, a lot more of an extensive period, longer than whenever Shoto was actually born in canon. Which would make, Touya actually noticeably a lot older than, Shoto. Which would need to happen in order for this to, make any lick of sense. I mean, Toya's still going to be Endeavor's son. It's just, he's going to be a lot older than he is in canon, so that this little thing of him taking care of Izuku actually would be able to make sense. At least somewhat make sense. And about the whole thing with the Endeavor family in general, or actually, excuse moi, pardon my French, the actual Todoroki family, yes, the Todoroki family, the Shoto Todoroki, Touya Todoroki, so yeah, I'm going to be aging up Touya so that this would be able to happen. And that would also require me to age up a couple other characters so that Endeavor can still stay a reasonable age for his parentage of Touya and, Shoto to actually make sense. Still makes sense. And the same would happen with Ray. Endeavor and Ray would also be a lot older than in canon. A lot older. But they would be older than they are in canon whenever they're first introduced. Because if I have to alter Touya's age for this to work, that means I would have to alter Endeavor and Ray's age in order for it to work. And that would also, be something I would be doing with Shoto so that everything can align perfectly. And whatever age Touya's at whenever this thing that starts the actual canonicity, like this what is actual own, like its own canonicity to start happening, the events that transpire, well, I'm gonna go ahead and say that Inko was going through the stages of grief, but not in the way you would expect. Oh, not over the death of a loved one, over the betrayal of a loved one stabbing her in the back at the worst time, just leaving right whenever she needed that loved one the most. And so it would just be, Inko and the little Midoriya, little Izuku Midoriya. Inko would be there, but Touya, him being in the shadows because this wouldn't have been long since, he had left, being presumed dead. He could just, as long as he was in the shadows, no one would know that he was there, and he could be able to do whatever he wanted. Hell, with how powerful his quirk is, he'd probably still be able to do whatever he wanted, considering how powerful it is and what exactly it is. And so, Touya, the son of Endeavor, one of his sons, Touya would indeed observe how Inko was working so hard, trying so hard to calm the young boy down, the young boy nestled in her arms. The boy, he was still crying though. It was as if whenever that man, whoever he was, left, he took something away that could never be repaired, it could never be fixed. Now Touya has reason to not like Hisashi. Because, family problems, he would probably not like Hisashi because of, the events previously transpired events. And so Touya, this would all just remind him of everything that his father put him and his siblings through. and is probably still putting his siblings through. And he heard about his mother. They're expecting another sibling. Whenever Touya heard about that, he knew he would have to leave. He just couldn't take it anymore. But he saw no good reason for this man to leave this poor woman. But Touya couldn't just appear out of nowhere, no. There were people looking for him. There were still people looking high and low for Touya Todoroki. And if they found him, they would definitely want to take him in. And he was not in the mood to be dealing with, pro heroes at the moment. So instead, he sneakily approached the scene and, well, as sneakily as he had tried to be, Inko still noticed him and was frightened at first, but then she realized it was someone who she didn't exactly remember knowing them. Why would they be walking towards her? There's no familiarities in between the two. What was the purpose of any of this? Unannounced to, Inko herself, her motherly instincts kicking in caused her to be so on the alert that she lost all reasoning within her own mind, and so perceived Touya as a threat, whenever he was really just caught at a bad time, and possibly at a very bad place. Touya, noticing that this woman was on very high alert, that she was actually taking a defensive stance against him, he noticed that this must mean that she perceives him as a threat to the child. Touya would just breathe in, breathe out. He was going to have to explain some things. First of all, that he had no intention on hurting the child. In fact, that would just bring up memories of his own father, what he would do to his own children. And whenever Inko heard that from Touya's mouth, what would have escaped Touya's mouth, the words that would have escaped his mouth, Touya and Inko would have both reacted at the same time. Her reaction more of shock, about what this guy's life must have been like. And whoever his father is, they must be a terrible person. And Touya's reaction more of just shock that he really didn't know. He really didn't understand either. And all throughout this, the kid would have been crying still. Inka would have admitted to Touya that she had seemed to try everything, but, nothing seems to have actually calmed the tiny child down. And then Touya's biggest, frustrations had come true. He was spotted. Evidently, Inko pointing out that the person yelling to the cops was actually her friend Mitsuki, so not to hurt her. Touya, would have hurt her if it wasn't for Inko saying not to, and, him not wanting to upset the woman. And Touya really couldn't tell why that he would, be so lenient. Or was leniency the right word for it, really? Well, was it? Or was it not? He didn't know, but this time he decided he didn't care. He was not going to be taken in by the police. He was never going to go back. Not unless it was to kill him. Make him suffer. But Touya knew it was going to be a long time before he could master his quirk in a way which would allow him to do it. To break the number 2 hero down to his knees for what he had done all of Touya's life. The terrible person that Endeavor was. Touya would want to expose him right before he destroyed him for the terrible person he was. Even voicing that his feelings of words that they would never take him alive, that they would have to catch up with him first, as he would burst into blue flames with a streak across from the area where they were once at. Inko would actually be trying to follow him and actually try to get answers as to what was going on. And Mitsuki would try to warn our friend about what she was doing, that it was dangerous. And then Mitsuki would then remember there had been many times in which Inko had tried to warn her about things that were dangerous, but she never listened. So maybe this was just karma going to bite her in the ass. But she would be damned if she wasn't going to bite back, or at least try to. And she would try to find out where Inko had ran off to, but she would just end up making herself get lost within all of the forestation and the deep woods. Inko still trying her best to keep up with that man with the blue flame quirk. That young man with the quirk that created the blue flames. She was doing her best, using her quirk to accelerate her movements, so she'd be able to have at least a little bit of chance of keeping up with him. Then she realized it could indeed be dangerous for Izuku if she got too close, too fast. Especially in the fact that the flames he was emitting, blue flames, hotter than regular fire. Fire in general was bad for anybody, but baby, and the fact that these are blue flames that he's emitting, Inko would be thinking in her head, right as she was about to stop Touya would stop too. He would turn around to ask her, why was she following him? Why was she getting herself involved in something like this? Something that would only end up getting her, in trouble too. And, well, Touya would indeed say he knows about the kid that she was taking with her. It must be her kid. Why would she want to force something like that onto her own child? Is that really something a loving mother would want to do to their own child? As Touya would be saying these words to Inko, he would flashes of his own mother, Rei, as Touya would just begin to break down, as his blue flame quirk would begin to spew out everywhere, in every which direction. This is indeed what was described as the scene, what it looked like whenever they found what they believed originally to be his body. But it turned out that, unbeknownst to them, Touya would say, what they buried was just a decoy. After all, I am still indeed alive. I'm right, like hell, I'm right in front of you, aren't I? And Inko would just be like, yes, you are. Uh, Touya? And Touya would answer back with, you never said your name. And then Inko would say, Inko Midoriya. And Touya would then say, to even his own surprise, he would ask, and the name of the boy? And then Izuku, and then Inko would say, he's Izuku Midoriya. But none of that matters. His father is gone, and I'm just left alone with Izuku, just barely managing to go by, just barely managing to survive, as we are now. Now that I think about it, what kind of an idiot am I, following you, someone that the police would want to turn in? I really would be getting myself and Izuku in deep trouble. I would have him being taken away from me. And then Touya would say, that is, unless you had someone who was strong enough to keep that from happening. In fact, maybe indeed you already do. My father put us through so much torture and pain. And God knows what he's going to do to the one who's going to be my younger sibling, my new younger sibling. The next child to be born to the Todoroki family. And to be the next offspring of the number 2 hero, Endeavor. That bastard. And Inko would just be like, why is this? And Touya would just cut her off again. Important? Simple. I'll tell you indeed. It's simple why it's important. Because I promise you, regardless what actually happens to you, I know you would want for at least him to be safe. In that way, you truly are a kind soul. And you just merely wanting the boy to be able to survive, caring about him so much, worrying about him, why he won't stop crying, fearing for him, like wondering if there's something wrong. You care about your own child. Unlike him, he didn't care about any of us. He still doesn't care about any of us. Inko, you said, I will correct this. I will give this boy a life worth living, even if it's required that I sacrifice myself. And then Touya would be thinking to himself, just inside his own head, the boy will carry on my will even after I would be gone. And if somehow Endeavor is still alive, I'm sure the way I would raise the boy, he would want to make Endeavor's life hell too, and even possibly be able to do it. That is, if I already wasn't able to, somehow. Touya has his own priorities, and Inko would just be like, so you you wish to, and Touya would say, yes, your child will be safe within my hands. I will make sure of it. And then Inko would be like, but he would still have, he still wouldn't have another parent. Oh, is that so? Well then, I've got news for you. I may be on the run, but I was able to make some connections along the way. Someone, a general, you may know her as Esdeath. And Inko, whenever she would hear the name Esdeath, she would just be like, you have connections with General Esdeath? And Touya would be like, well, I can keep those connections as long as you make sure to be quiet about them. Remember, I'm on the run from these, heroes and cops. As long as they think that Touya Todoroki is still dead. As long as they still think the real me is dead, things should be good. Me and Esdeath will raise this boy to be a fine young man. And Inko would be like, is that a promise? And Touya would be like, you can count on it. I don't intend to break promises to such kind-hearted individuals whenever in this world, in this hero society, there are so little actually genuinely kind people like you, Inko. Well, I guess it means I'm off. And Inko would be like, what do you mean? And then Touya would just be like, didn't you hear it? Here, listen. And then she would just hear what sounded like an alarm. And then there would be several pro heroes, and they would have eventually found someone. They wouldn't automatically recognize who it was. You know, the several things that Endeavor did to freaking Touya before he did what he did about, faking his death. Basically erasing himself from the earth. The police and the pro heroes, they would hear the sound of marching people. No, marching soldiers as a 10 hut would then be heard. As someone would walk towards them even after the men had stopped, until they were in the front, in full view of the pro heroes and the law enforcement. This person, a woman, she would indeed relay that this individual, well, there with her, and so was the child. However, the other lady, Anko would then understand she would kind of have to cut all of her ties with Izuku. Like the sign language that this person was doing, not only would it basically signal to her that this person was Esdeath, or General Esdeath, as she's more famously known, but it would also signal to her that, that was kind of the circumstances of the entire thing. If, she wanted the deal, the done deal, she was going to have to be separated from her own, birth child's life. But hey, Touya promised that him and Esdeath, this, General Esdeath lady, him and her would take good care of Izuku. And eventually, whenever Esdeath and, she wouldn't be able to see Inko anymore, she would just be like, men, scout out for the woman, if you know what I'm talking about here. And the soldiers would just be like, yes, ma'am. And then they'd just be scouting out, and then they would return, and they would be like, the woman is no longer within the vicinity. You may depart. You may dispatch yourself from the scene. And, the pro heroes and the police, they would be like, well, this is General Esdeath. If we try to do anything, even though we know this is kind of technically pseudo-illegal, what she's doing here with this person, pseudo-illegal, I guess you could call it, pseudo-illegal. What Esdeath is doing with, Touya. Toya's trying to make it so that they can't really get any of his main features, get a good look at him. Trying to hide his, very specific features so that no one can tell it's him. And no one can say to Endeavor that his son, Touya Todoroki, is still alive, just using the alias of Dabi now. As long as he makes sure to keep himself very hidden and low profile, he should be perfectly fine. That's what Touya tells himself. And that's, around the time he met up with Esdeath, and, she'd be doing her thing, and, she would be liking Touya's style. And Touya would be liking her style, and, with each other liking their styles, they kind of just meshed with each other perfectly fine. And so, eventually, Touya kind of showed her around because, there was new territory. Well, like, Touya would basically be like, Esdeath could probably consider this new territory for her and her men. So, because, Esdeath would have told them by now, seeing as they were kind of dating, in their relationship. Esdeath would have told them by now, at that point, that she was a general. And, with all the soldiers always around her, Touya would be like, yeah, I kind of already figured. And, Esdeath and Touya, they would be like made for each other. Because one of them has blue flame powers, and the other one has freaking ice powers. And is a general of a freaking army. And she can basically just make people like pro heroes and actual law enforcement of certain restrictions, like districts, freaking just bend their knee to the power of the almighty Esdeath, the general Esdeath. At least I heard that she's a general, I think. Anyways, if she isn't, I'm gonna make her a general. And so, it would just be Touya and then Esdeath. They'd be hanging out. And eventually Touya would bring little Izuku along for the ride. And Esdeath would be like, the kid's kind of cute. And he seems to actually like you a lot. Because, he's actually started to stop crying. But then Esdeath would notice, after she got, cheeky with freaking Touya, messing with him, Izuku started crying again, and that's whenever Esdeath would put on sort of some motherly charm, be all nurturing towards Izuku. A lot of Touya's and Esdeath's, personality imprinting that they would be doing would kind of be what sculpted Izuku into what he would eventually become. And so, yeah, there's that. But, well, that wouldn't be the only thing. Because Izuku, he wouldn't be an only child. Izuku, Touya would have just pulled a fast one on Esdeath by, having Izuku in their lives. So Esdeath would decide to get, one back on him, get back at him by throwing another child into their lives, whether it be beneficial to them or not. How many benefits there would be of actually having two children instead of one, just having one. And this other child, well, because of the way she was technically brought into the family, Touya would technically just throw her out, and she would be able to live in the house, just she wouldn't ever be allowed to be seen by Izuku unless she was outside of their house. To make it to where he could never make the connection that they were actually family. So instead, Izuku would make the connection that, they were freaking like boyfriend and girlfriend. And this person, I'm gonna say, is Setsuna. Yes, that's who Esdeath would fire back with. She would basically just, whatever happened to Setsuna, God knows what happened in order for, Esdeath to get a hold of her. You know, I, Esdeath would get a hold of Setsuna, and Setsuna would become a part of their lives, but, kind of not, because of what Touya decided to do, because, he got pissed whenever Esdeath, he figured about what Esdeath was trying to do, get back at him for the major amount of bullshit he pulled, and pulling Izuku into their lives. And so, basically, Touya would make it to where Setsuna would never know that she was actually brothers. She was actually supposed to be Izuku's, adopted brother. And so, like, your sister acting like she's your girlfriend, and you not knowing that she's actually your sister, and, her acting like she's your girlfriend, that's gonna, Esdeath, if she ever found out about any of that activity going on in secret, in hiding, yeah, Esdeath would be royally pissed if she found out about that. And so, whenever, Esdeath and Touya ended up being forced into a corner, having to, basically say what needed to be said, instead of being like, oh, Setsuna, you can live here, but you can never let this one kid, I'll just give you a vague description of him, you can never be seen by him, you two can never make eye contact. You can never, ever be, have any relationship with him at all. You have to stay away from each other like he's the freaking plague, or else you are kicked out of the freaking house. That's basically what Touya would be doing. So, not much better than his father. Basically, he would ban Setsuna from being a part of the family if, Izuku actually managed to see her in the same house as him. In their house. And so Esdeath would be like, okay, we gotta find a way to fix this. And, they would find a way to fix it. In the form of seeing as, mostly Izuku and Setsuna were acting boyfriend and girlfriend with each other, they would have to pull some Sweet Home Alabama bullshit. Because you be acting like that to your own freaking sister because you don't know that she's your sister. And now all of a sudden you realize that lady who you were putting the moves on was your sister, and now we have to straighten things out this way. We have to fix the problem by getting you people to stop acting this way. Setsuna would basically be like, you two are brother and sister, not freaking boyfriend and girlfriend, so stop acting like it. She would just break the news to both Izuku and Setsuna. Setsuna, her whole thing with, basically having to break up with Izuku because turns out, hey, they're actually brother and sister. So there would be a breakup. Technically, she would be his ex now, his ex-girlfriend. Yeah, his own sister would be his ex-girlfriend. Because they just now found out about that factoid of them being brother and sister. And, the whole thing with, it being staged to where them not knowing, and so pulling that Sweet Home Alabama bullshit. And so, yeah, Setsuna would technically not only be Izuku's sister, but, adopted sister, but sister nonetheless. But she would also be his ex-girlfriend, which would make things, whenever guests came over, because inevitably that was going to happen sooner or later. That would make conversations at the dinner table very, very awkward. And just, like the majority of the time, either Esdeath soldiers that she has working for her would have to kill the people, or, Touya would just do it for her. Because, Touya would have to find some way to relieve stress. And he can't freaking masturbate because he has a wife. So, yeah, that would be a way to relieve stress. Freaking, scorch the hell out of these people who are making the freaking, their dinner awkward as hell for them as a family. And, it would be very, very, sketchy, like the kind of relationship Izuku and Setsuna would have, figuring out their brother and sister, and all this time they had been acting like boyfriend and girlfriend. Yeah, it would definitely be really just really a bunch of no. So yeah, and anything after that, well, Izuku, knowing that, the person who he thought was his freaking girlfriend is actually his adopted sister, because, technically he's an adopted son, but, his adopted sister, Setsuna, Izuku would, wanting something like the good old days whenever he was ignorant as hell about the whole situation with him and Setsuna, how things were actually going on behind the scenes. He'd be looking for something to reenact the days of old without the weirdness and cringiness. Minus all of that, like reenact the days of old. The days of old, minus all of the cringiness and weirdness. And he would find that in a little something, well, there would be this, I do indeed believe, blonde-haired girl who would call herself Pony. And, well, Izuku would have met her before several times, even whenever he still thought that Setsuna was, even back then he knew about Pony. But, back then they were just friends. And then he would have to break the ice to Pony about the whole situation that he and his family had to go through. And, well, with that, turns out Pony wouldn't, hate him or anything. If anything, this would actually make Pony, want to give Izuku affection. She would feel bad for Izuku because of all the awkwardness and cringiness he would have had to go through, and, the way his parents act whenever, those weird nights whenever they're having dinner and guests are over. Oh boy. Especially whenever guests are over. And so Pony and him would eventually end up becoming good, quick friends. And eventually Pony would actually say something to Izuku like she would want to introduce him to a friend of hers. And he would ask to know the friend's name. And, well, Pony would be like, oh, she's already, around here. And, Pony's friend would end up coming out of, behind her hiding spot that she had made for herself. And her friend, it turns out, their name would be, I believe it was Reiko? Yeah, Reiko. Her friend's name, Pony would say that her friend's name was Reiko. And, seeing as both of them are girls, and Reiko just has her white hair, and, well, Izuku would be thinking, they're both pretty cool. And so, don't think that Touya and Esdeath wouldn't know about Pony and Reiko. Or Reika, or whatever. I'm gonna say Reiko. Don't think that Touya or Esdeath would be ignorant to Pony and Reiko's existences. They would actually know about them. And, well, considering the whole situation with Izuku and the person who he would say to them was supposed to be his sister, or at least his adopted sister, Setsuna, things that Izuku would say about Setsuna, their relationship after, everything was found out about what they exactly are to each other, or at least supposed to be to each other. Yeah, after that, Setsuna was actually kinda really cold to Izuku, and, well, technically still is very cold to him. And, well, all throughout middle school, because both Pony and Reiko would stay Izuku's friends all the way from, his latter years of kindergarten and, all the way into middle school. Both Esdeath and Touya would be surprised that he kept those friends for that long, or, any friends for that long. And not only that, but, surprised that they're girls that he kept as friends for that long. Especially after Setsuna, and the fact that he literally just admitted how cold she is to him. No pun intended to involve, Esdeath. Nothing of a pun intended that would involve Esdeath, even though I know about the whole ice thing. And, Esdeath. But still, no pun intended, Setsuna's still pretty damn cold to Izuku after everything was found out. And she's never really changed her tune since. Even whenever she gets punished for being mean to Izuku, she still never really changes her tune. And she's actually several times attempted to assist this Katsuki Bakugo kid in bullying him. Yeah, her and Bakugo, Setsuna and Bakugo in this are actually really good friends because they both have something in common. They enjoy bullying the hell out of Izuku. Granted, for different reasons. That would be obvious, for people that are paying attention to the video that I'm making right now. The keen eyes out there, the keen ears. Both Setsuna and Bakugo both like the same thing, torturing the hell out of Izuku. But fortunately for Izuku, both Pony and Reiko, they both not only have stayed with him all the way into middle school, this is the last year of middle school, and they've still stayed with him, and they're still friends with him. They're both his friends, people that he can rely on to help him get back up whenever he's knocked down. And in a way, Touya and Esdeath both think that's kind of sweet. But eventually, we do indeed cut to the last day of middle school and Bakugo having his whole spiel. But, right before Bakugo is about to leave, Reiko would punish him greatly for saying what he said. And whenever Setsuna would try to, get in the way of her punishing Bakugo for being a dick, she would drop her. Yeah, she would drop both Bakugo and Setsuna. The only difference is Setsuna's face would be broken in, and Bakugo's freaking wrist would be broken. So yeah, Setsuna's face would be broken in, cracked in, and Bakugo's wrist would be heavily, messed up. After Reiko, grabbing it and just mangling it all to hell. And Izuku would be like, Reiko, you don't have to do that. And Reiko would be like, what kind of a friend would I be if I didn't? And Pony would be like, well, I don't know, but still, I think, if at least for once he followed Izuku's advice, that would be nice. And Reiko's like, so you're insisting that I allow them to do that to Izuku without being punished? Never. I would never. What kind of friend would I be if I did? Now, can you answer that question for me, Pony? That's right. I thought so. And there would just be rage in Reiko's eyes. And Izuku would be like, please try to calm down, Reiko. It's really obvious that Pony is indeed at least somewhat right. You didn't have to go that far. Now, I don't know what Mom and Dad are going to think. You even hurt Setsuna. I mean, I do know that she was indeed helping Bakugo hurt me, but still, I mean, because of what you did, I mean, I can't really ensure that you and your family and friends will all be okay. Do you know how my parents are? I mean, you do know that, right, Reiko? And Reiko would just be like, oh, yes, that's right. It's sad, really. Me dealing out justice for what your sister was assisting being done to you. My family would be punished for that? Your family, your family should know that Setsuna was the one who started the problem. So, Setsuna should be the one who gets punished. And Touya, being the occasional eavesdropper parent that he is, he would have heard Setsuna's, not really said, Reiko's own spiel, and, a good chunk of the conversation. And, he'd be able to piece things together, and he'd just be like, so, Setsuna did something that got herself punished by one of your friends, Izuku. Let me guess. It's the white-haired wonder, who was the one who basically kicked Setsuna's face almost completely open. Now, I will indeed have to admit I'm not okay with that, exactly. But I will indeed agree with Reiko on the fact that she did indeed have it coming to her after assisting someone like him in the pain of her own brother, suffering of her own brother. Now tell me, Izuku, what do me and your mother always try to drill into you and your sister's head? And Izuku's like, that family shouldn't hurt family. And then Touya would be like, and that's exactly why after the nurse gets done helping patch up your sister's wounds, whenever we get back home, me and your mother are going to be having a long discussion about this. And then, everything will be dealt with properly. Alright, go. You're not going to have to worry about a thing. I think I can manage Esdeath enough. Esdeath being Izuku's mother, I'm sure you're aware of by now. I think I can micromanage her own anger enough that she wouldn't kill anyone who loved you or you loved. And then Reiko would just quietly say, so she wouldn't hurt Izuku or kill him. And then, Touya would have picked up on it. Reiko wouldn't be too good at being quiet, and he would just be like, so you care about Izuku. That's why you did what you did. And that Bakugo kid, he deserves worse than just his wrists being twisted into a mangled pulp mesh. But I still am indeed happy that it happened to him. That he got at least something close enough to what he deserved for what he tried to do to my family, my own son, adopted or not. You're still my son, and anyone who tries to hurt you or your sister will be dealt with very. Oh, they will be dealt with indeed. You can be assured by both me and your mother. In fact, I believe we've assured you and your sister multiple times that we would never let anyone have harm's way come towards you. So, after the injury dealt to your sister's face is all patched up, we're heading home. Is that clear, Izuku? And Izuku would be like, yes, Dad. And Touya would just be like, oh, and seems that there's more to this story than just the one who caused some pandemonium within the ranks. You, yes, you, Blondie. And, Pony would just be like, oh no. And Touya would be like, actually, more like, oh yes. Considering, do you really think I would ever hurt you? All you've ever been to my son is good. You've only ever been good to him. You have never, ever tried to hurt him. And if you ever have, it's always been on accident. Or a slight oversight that, can always just be fixed. Put back in its right placement. You, Pony. Yes. I presume that you would be the one to try to be the reasonable one and fix this whole conundrum before it even started. Pony would be like, well, you're not wrong. And Touya would just be like, Todoroki, you can call me. And then Pony would be like, oh, yeah, that's right. Uh, 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 what can I call you? Just call me Mr. Todoroki from now on. As I am one of them, as much as I am ashamed to admit it, it still flows through my blood. And the shame does indeed dial down whenever I remember. Both Izuku and Setsuna are also Todorokis due to certain circumstances in which they were let into our family. And also, my wife, Esdeath, she was also made a Todoroki. So, the shame is indeed dialed down a lot whenever I take these individuals into consideration. My family, the one I actually want to be a part of, the part of the Todoroki family I actually am proud to be a part of. But the others, they can all burn in hell. Is that understood, Pony? Reiko? Is that understood? I said, is that understood? And Reiko and Pony would just be like, yes, Mr. Todoroki, sir. And, Touya would just be like, ah, yes, Mr. Todoroki, sir. That does indeed sound nice. Now, we should indeed be getting home, Izuku, Setsuna. Very quick, fast, and in a hurry. Otherwise, your mom's gonna throw another shit fit. How much longer till Setsuna's able to be let out of the, where your friend put her? Then Setsuna would just walk out of the nurse's office with her face mostly covered up in bandages, and you would kind of be able to sense the fear in her, like the fear of God that was put into her. You would just be able to see, and you'd be able to see and sense, both see and sense the fear of God that she was given whenever she would look over to see Reiko, and her eyes just cold, steely eyes of just pure freaking hatred and just death glare all over. So Setsuna would just be scared shitless every time she would look at Reiko, because Reiko would look back, and her look would be way more terrifying than anything Setsuna could muster as of the moment. And, Pony would be like, well, I try to stop these things from happening, but Reiko always seems to beat me to the punch. And, Touya would be like, well, at least he has one friend that helps with damage control around here. Now, as per the fact that this is the last day of middle school for all of you, which one of you actually signed up for UA? And then Setsuna would actually be afraid to, do it. She would see that Izuku had raised his hand, actually, with not much fear in him. Because, Touya knows that Izuku wants to get into UA. And Toya's told him this, that he already knows. So, Izuku has no problem, just letting it be known. But Setsuna not so much. She can barely move anything after that, thrashing she just got from Reiko. The fear of God that was put into her, that Reiko just put into her, full force. But Setsuna did indeed write her name down, so, as to not lie, she would have to raise her hand. The most she could at the time. Because, being as thrashed as she was, coordination, of her body was kind of weird. Would kind of be the reason why she was exiting the school in a wheelchair. Because she wouldn't really be on her feet all that well after the extreme thrashing she would have gotten by the hands of Reiko. Someone who would consider herself like Izuku's ultimate bestie, whose friendship levels with Izuku would only be rivaled by Pony's level of friendship towards him. But, Reiko and Pony were already friends before they met Izuku. Pony met Izuku and introduced Reiko to Izuku. So they were already friends with each other, so no resentment, no harm done. Like, Pony and Reiko would raise their hands, like, they would want to, like, do the entrance exam. You know, it would just be like, everybody would raise their hand and be like, Reiko, Pony, Izuku, freaking Setsuna. Bakugo was no longer there, so he wouldn't be there to raise his hand. But, like, Setsuna would basically, the best she could, let her father know that Bakugo had also written his name down, so he was probably going to take the entrance exam too. And so, yeah, with all these people having, basically freely just stated now that they were going to take the entrance exam, and, the majority of these people being Izuku's friends, and, well, Setsuna being Setsuna, the adopted sister of Izuku in this what if. Touya would just be like I said, we need to get home lickety split before your mother has a major shit fit over God knows what. Besides the fact that we're possibly late for something, it's always something with her. My little Esdeath. And, Setsuna would just be like, even with all the bandages on her face, she would just be like, oh my god, Dad, this is really embarrassing. Can't you see you're embarrassing me and Izuku both? And Izuku would be like, no, I'm perfectly fine with it. It's good that, Mom and Dad like each other. Have a good relationship. And Touya would just be like, my one and only General Esdeath. General of my D.I.C. Oh. Kids. Kids around here. Shit. Well, looks like we're going either way. So, you two better hold on, especially you, Setsuna. We don't need to reopen those wounds. It'll just take us longer to get home. And Setsuna would be like, oh god, we're gonna have to hold on to your arms, aren't we? And Izuku's like, thank you, Captain Obvious. And they would just both grab onto Toya's arms as he would have them behind him, and would just pull like a Bakugo explosive speed, but he would just jet out and like go like supersonic speeds, like break the sound barrier, just speed off home. And that is indeed where I'm going to end this the first part of this what if. I'm not really sure what I want to call it. There are two different things I could call it, but I'm not sure. I'm not really settled on what I want to call it. It could either be what if Izuku was Toya's son or raised by Touya or whatever. Or what if Touya raised Izuku? I really don't know what to call it. At least not yet. Whenever I actually have to get to calling it, while I'm making, like I'm finishing up everything to get the video actually up on YouTube, that's when I will have to make the hard choice. But hey, the rest of it will be an easy choice afterwards, because basically I'll just be doing the same name for each next part. So, as for things, Alan's Anadousis, because the Dr. Sharon Maverick is OUT out of here. Ya boys, Hasta la vista, baby!